Chicago during Prohibition, just imagine it for a second. A city just humming with this secret energy, right? Fortunes made underground, danger literally everywhere.
Oh yeah, it was this incredible time when the demand for illegal booze basically created this whole violent underworld.
And that's where we're diving in today. We're looking at that really volatile time, but focusing on one family that, well, they carved out a pretty big slice for themselves, even if it didn't last long.
Yeah,
The Genna crime family.
exactly. We're working from a historical overview here, which gives us a good, sharp look at how they shot up and crashed down just as quickly during those Prohibition years. We're talking roughly 1919 to 1930.
And their home base was Chicago's Little Italy, a really vibrant place, but it became the absolute center of their operation.
Right.
So the real question for us today, the thing we want to unpack is, who exactly were these Genna brothers? How did they actually build up their power? And maybe most importantly, why did it all fall apart so dramatically?
That's the core of it. We want to get into their family structure, how they operated, their methods, and yeah, the key things that just brought their whole reign to a very abrupt end.
A fascinating case study, really.
Definitely, especially for that period.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning, the Genesis. 6 brothers coming over from Marsala in Sicily.
Right.
And they were active, as you said, for just about a decade, maybe a bit more, but almost right away, they made their mark on Little Italy. That shared background, being Sicilian, probably helped them gain influence there early on.
I think so, and it's interesting looking at the source, how wide-ranging their criminal stuff was.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, bootlegging was central, we'll get into that, but it also mentions racketeering, extortion, illegal gambling, other crimes too.
It's not just a one-trick pony.
No, definitely not. They had multiple angles, multiple ways to bring in cash and exert control.
Yeah.
That was probably key to their initial power grab.
And they got a nickname pretty fast, didn't they? The Terrible Genus. That alone tells you something about their reputation. So let's quickly run through the brothers. First, you had Vincenzo, known as James. He was seen as the leader, right?
Yeah, James Genna was the top guy.
Yeah.
Then there was Angelo, the youngest, nicknamed Bloody Angelo. He was the muscle, the main enforcer.
Sounds like it.
And the overview mentions he was heavily involved in those 19th Ward political wars later on, which hints at how tangled up they were with, city politics.
Always important back then. Next, Mike Genna, the devil. Sounds like he was the one doing the dirty work.
Seems that way. The overview suggests he handled the low-level violence, the intimidation needed to keep things running.
Then the contrast, Antonio the gentleman.
Right. He seemed to stay more in the background, maybe handling the strategy, the finances, less hands-on, it appears.
And Sam Genna, his role was managing the political side.
Exactly, keeping those connections strong. In that world, having friends in high or even low places in the city structure was absolutely crucial. You couldn't survive without it.
Makes sense. And finally, Peter. He ran a saloon.
Yeah, which sounds legitimate, but you can bet it served other purposes. A front, maybe a meeting spot, definitely another income stream. It shows how blurry the lines were between legal and illegal business.
Okay, so let's get to the big one. Bootlegging. This was the engine, wasn't it? Both for their rise and their fall. And this is where it gets really clever, or maybe just audacious.
A little cold, yeah.
They actually got a federal license to make industrial alcohol.
It's kind of amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Legally producing alcohol, but clearly the plan was always to sell it as booze.
Yeah.
It wasn't just clever. It showed how flawed the whole Prohibition setup was. The law itself could be twisted.
A classic move. And they had their territory, Little Italy, pretty well mapped out. Chicago River, Kinsey Street, Kedzie Avenue, Roosevelt Road, that was their zone. And at first, they were playing ball, sort of. Part of Johnny Torrio's big beer cartel, with an agreement to only sell booze within their own turf.
Right. These agreements were common then.
Yeah.
Gangs trying to carve up the city, avoid stepping on each other's toes too much. Didn't always last, though.
No, definitely not here, because the money was just too tempting, right? By 1924, the Gennas started selling their extra alcohol, cheap, outside their area.
And you can guess how that went down.
Yeah. It put them right on a collision course with Dean O'Banion and his North Side gang.
O'Banion saw it as, well, a direct challenge, breaking the rules, cutting into his profits. So he went to Torrio, and also Mike Merlot, who was a big deal in the Union Siciliana, and basically demanded they punish the Gennas.
But Torrio, he didn't do anything.
Seems like he hesitated, maybe trying to avoid a war. Maybe he just underestimated how serious O'Banion was. Whatever the reason, His inaction was a huge mistake.
Because O'Banion didn't wait. His crew started hijacking Genna liquor shipments.
That's a serious escalation, hitting them right in the wallet and publicly thumbing their nose at them.
You knew something had to give. Then came May 1924. O'Banion sets Torrio up, gets him arrested at the Seaman Brewery raid.
A very bold move, a direct slap in the face to Torrio. And then, to make things even more unstable, Mike Merlo, who kind of kept a lid on things between factions, he dies in November. Natural causes, but terrible timing.
Merlo was important.
Oh, yeah. As a leader in the Union Siciliana, this sort of fraternal organization, but really a network of Italian-American crime figures, he had a lot of sway. He was a peacekeeper, in a way. His death removed a big stabilizing influence.
And the Genna saw their chance, or maybe just felt they had no choice. The very next day after Merlo's death, banned him.
Janet Hitman, John Scalise, Albert Anselmi, and Frankie Yale came along too. They walked right into O'Banion's flower shop on North State Street and killed him.
Just like that. And that lit the fuse for the beer wars.
Absolutely. O'Banion's murder was a declaration. It showed the Gennas would go to extremes. No more negotiation.
After O'Banion was gone, things quieted down, but only for a moment, right? Jaime Weiss took over the North Side gang, and there was this brief, uneasy truce with the Gennas.
Very brief. Because Weiss and the Northsiders, they didn't forget. They shifted their focus, started going after the Torrio Capone gang instead. There's that drive-by shooting targeting Capone's car.
Right, and the ambush on Torrio himself nearly killed him.
Exactly. It just showed the Northsiders were still out for revenge, still fighting against the rising power of the Italian gangs. The whole city felt like a powder keg.
And then the violence turned back on the Gennas themselves. Spring and summer of 1925, things unraveled incredibly fast for them. Angelo Genna, Bloody Angelo, he was first, killed in a high-speed chase May 27th.
Yeah, a huge blow. Losing their main enforcer like that, it showed they were vulnerable.
Then, not even a month later, June 13th, Mike, the Devil Genna, shot dead by police after a gunfight with Northsiders.
The violence they dished out was coming right back at them, relentlessly.
And the final nail, really, was July 8th, Antonio the Gentleman Genna, ambushed, murdered.
So, in just over a month, 3 brothers gone.
Wow. May, June, July. Just like that.
Yeah.
So what happened to the other 3? Jim, Sam, and Pete?
Well, what could they do? They fled Chicago. Their power base was just shattered. Their reign was completely over. It's really startling how quickly it all collapsed.
It really is. Shows how unstable things were. One minute you're on top, the next.
Exactly. You're gone. And the source notes the other brothers died later, but outside of that Chicago power struggle, Vincenzo, or James, in 31, Peter in 48, and Sam in 1951. So that chapter was definitively closed.
Okay, let's pull back a little. The source mentions another figure, Anthony D'Andrea, a Sicilian mafia boss in Little Italy before the Gennas really hit their peak.
That's right. D'Andrea was a major player, head of the Chicago branch of the Union Siciliana. The Gennas actually operated gambling joints and saloons in his territory initially, suggesting they were, under his umbrella to some extent.
And D'Andrea had political ambitions, too. Ran for alderman.
He did, yeah. For the 19th Ward, which covered Little Italy. That race against the incumbent, John Powers, got really violent. They call it the Alderman's Wars. D'Andrea didn't win, and he ended up getting assassinated in 1921.
Ah, okay. So D'Andrea's death in 21. That would have created a power vacuum, wouldn't it?
Precisely. A vacuum the Gennas were perfectly positioned to step into, maybe even taking over his role within the Union Siciliana, as the source seems to suggest. It just shows how these things are all connected. One death that shifts the whole balance.
And the story doesn't end with the Gennases' fall either, who filled their shoes.
Well, into that void stepped Joe Aiello and his brothers.
Mm-hmm.
They took over the Genna turf in Little Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And they were ambitious, too. They allied themselves with Salvatore Maranzano, a big New York boss.
Okay.
And they also kept ties with what was left of the North Side gang.
So Aiello basically tried to build his own coalition?
Right. And they set their sights high. They actually tried to take on Al Capone himself for control of Chicago.
Oof. That sounds like a bad idea.
History tells us it was a very dangerous move. Their attempt failed, and Joe Aiello ended up getting murdered in 1930. Machine-gunned.
Capone again.
It seems so. Aiello's death really let Capone consolidate everything. He basically absorbed what was left, the Genna remnants, the Aiello faction, into his growing Chicago outfit. It marked the end of those earlier fragmented struggles and the real beginning of the Capone era.
So wrapping this up then, the Genna family. Quite a story. A super fast rise and then this incredibly quick, violent fall, all packed into that short Prohibition window.
Yeah, their story is almost like a perfect capsule of how Prohibition shaped things. It created the opportunity, fueled the ambition with huge amounts of cash, but also directly led to these brutal conflicts.
And it really paints a picture of just how violent that time was. Constant fighting over territory, over control, alliances shifting constantly. Betrayal seems like it was just part of doing business.
Absolutely. You couldn't trust anyone for long. And in the end, the Genna territory, their network, whatever was left of it, just got swallowed up by Capone's outfit. They were a big deal for a few years, but ultimately just a stepping stone in the larger story of Chicago crime.
So there you have it, the terrible Gennas. From Sicily to ruling Little Italy's rackets to igniting the beer wars and then just gone. A really compelling slice of a very dangerous time. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does their story really tell us about ambition, especially when it's tied up with crime? How fragile are those alliances built on violence and greed? And just how central was that violence to getting and keeping power back then?
It really does make you think about those dynamics, how those forces played out then, and maybe how they echo even now. And hey, if this got you interested, there's so much more to explore about the Chicago outfit, Capone, the whole Prohibition era. It's a deep rabbit hole.
Absolutely. Loads more stories there. We'll definitely be back soon with other deep dives into fascinating bits of history. Until then, keep asking questions. Keep digging into the stories that made the world what it is today.